Hello, welcome to the first year BTech course of Guru Nanak Institute of Technology, Kolkata. I'm Dr. Indrajit Bose and I will be your course instructor for this module. This paper is entitled English with a paper code of HU101. In this paper, I shall be guiding you in the major forms, modes, and genres of communication, and we shall be looking at examples from a globalized context as we go along. This is module 3 of the paper and is called Vocabulary and Reading. Throughout the lectures of this module, I shall be focusing on words and their varied usage and meanings. We shall be looking at the techniques of reading, various purposes of reading, and also exploring different reading texts. This is lecture 14 of the series and is entitled Reading Text Types and Text 1. In the course of this lecture, I shall be outlining the nature of academic reading and its purposes. We shall be looking at the different types of texts and the different types of texts and their reading purposes, including expository prose, fiction, as well as non-fiction. And we shall also be reading the first reading text, which is there in your BTech syllabus. Let us begin then by looking at the nature of academic reading. When I was talking about reading and how we live surrounded by a variety of different texts in the world around us, I had said that sometimes we read for pleasure and at other times we read for instruction. We can also distinguish some other purposes of reading in the sense that occasionally our reading is casual reading. When we are looking at a popular magazine or a newspaper, or we are looking at something on the internet, that is usually casual reading. Whereas when we are looking at a report or a survey of some kind, or I'm reading an academic paper, that is reading for academic and professional purposes. Most usually, the reading that is done in a formal course of study at college, university, or higher education levels, or else which is done at the workplace or place of business, that is reading for professional purposes and reading for academic purposes. Now, the purposes of academic reading are many and varied. Firstly, it is information gathering and retrieval. We are looking for some specific information. Here, the information may relate to a certain theory or discussion upon a certain theory or prototype, or maybe some application of that. Also, it is based upon the forming of arguments and opinions. When you read a scholarly paper or when you read an academic work or research paper, the forming of an argument is very, very crucial and important. The varied arguments given by different experts or scholars are summarized in these papers or works. It is up to the individual student to form his or her own opinion, and this opinion matters a lot. So the purpose of reading these different academic texts is to enable the learners or the students to gradually develop their own process of opinion formation, and then they will take part in opinion sharing by writing articles or term papers or dissertations themselves. Exposure to different viewpoints is definitely given in these academic texts. Most often, you will find that various scholarly journals, they carry discussions of experts and critics in the field, and various studies that they have undertaken are all summarized, reviewed, or discussed over there. So many different opinions Various counter arguments given by other critics or discussions are all given over there. So it provides a very valuable insight into the plethora of critical opinions in a particular subject or in a particular field. Now, what are the techniques that we follow in reading academic texts? Well, a good bit of it would involve very close reading in order to get the main ideas and points discussed by these writers, and also the various viewpoints given by other scholars and critics. So their views are often, quoted by us. So we would need to read very closely what they are saying. Also, sometimes the summaries that are given, uh, or certain sections we can skim over or just pass through, uh, and get a gist of what is discussed over there. At other points, we need to compare and contrast the views that are given over there, one scholar with another, one viewpoint against another, one article with other such articles written by other people in that field. Also, we evaluate or analyze the views that are given. So analysis and comparison and contrast. Again, these are other modes which are used. Now, the text types that would come within the ambit of academic reading are usually textbooks of various kinds and academic reference books. So they are all the subjects of study of students in different courses and curricula. Also various scholarly journals or research journals which contain different kinds of articles, papers written by scholars in various fields. So these would all come within the purview of academic reading. Now, when we read an academic text, how do we read? It's different from casual reading, isn't it? So how do we read? We are, of course, reading not just for instruction or information, though information gathering is one of the primary objectives, but we are reading for comparison and contrast, contrasting one view against others or summarizing a set of views, okay, on a certain subject. We're reading for analysis, obviously in-depth analysis of a certain subject or certain point of view given by a certain scholar is going to be very important. Also, to give systematic feedback. The feedback that we give on the basis of our reading of academic texts, or in other words, the output of that reading is in the form of term papers which we write, or which students in different courses are expected to write at periodic intervals. They write term papers, assignments which are set, and also exams. So, we also can note that another difference from casual reading is if I'm reading a novel or a magazine or a journal, they will not likely to be an assessment exercise based on that reading. Whereas if I'm doing any reading for academic purposes, I not only need to understand and assimilate the viewpoints given by that author over there, or make any kind of comparison and contrast of that author with other writings, but also this entire text has been given to me for the purpose of evaluation and expressing my judgment and opinions, or to assess my understanding of it. So to assess that, there are these term papers, assignments, and of course the exams which I have to write based on them. Now, how do we read the academic text? The method: we preview before reading. We get some information about the text, or before plunging into the text proper, we try to get as much information about it as we can to prepare ourselves for it. There are various things to guide us, of course. The jacket is there, the cover jacket with the information printed on that, the blurb, the reviews. Often excerpts from reviews are given at the back of the book, or at certain pages at the end of the book or at the beginning. So they all help in forming preliminary ideas and opinions. And of course, nowadays, we are all logged on to the internet, so we do get a lot of reviews on Amazon and other sites, which may be short, but they give us some kind of a pointer to what we might expect from the book. Then, of course, we read or we indulge in close reading. We read carefully and intensively. We grapple with the text. We circle, underline, highlight key concepts and ideas. So, in other words, we focus very closely, minutely on different sections, paragraphs, even on single words. Once we have looked at the information contained in certain sections or paragraphs, then we might look at the whole and also get our idea more clarified. We can prepare gists of certain sections, or we can summarize, or we can recap the main ideas and do a periodic review before the exams. Okay. So this is also different from books or other materials that we indulge in casual reading. Usually when we read anything for casual purposes, we just go through it, but we may not make any notes from it, or we may not summarize anything from it. If we remember anything from it, it is just fortuitous or accidental. Okay, I remember the date or fact that I picked up from reading the newspaper, but I haven't noted it down separately, and nor can I reproduce the other details that were given in that newspaper report because I didn't note it down in that way. On the other hand, academic reading appears to be pretty serious business because when we get the academic text, we not only grapple with it and try to understand and make sense of it in every way that we can, but we also try to retain a clear idea of what we have read in that academic text. And to do that, we do this highlighting, marking out of important points, summarizing, recapping, and so on. So ways of noting from an academic text are also quite different from what we do when we are reading anything in casual reading. Now, in this slide, I will show you some of the features of an academic text which are highlighted. This is the front page, or the first page rather, of a scholarly article or research paper. You will notice that at the very top there is a section where the publication information is given within space bars. So that is at the top margin. You have the publication information, including the name of the journal, the year of publication, the number of the journal, and so on. Also the page numbers obviously would be given over there. Other details come below that: the title of the paper, the author's name, other information, contact information, and affiliation of the author are given below the author's name. And you will also notice that there is a certain line over there which includes the keywords, or gives you the keywords which are contained in this particular article. So the keywords really, they are obviously sometimes given in italics. So the keywords would alert us to the nature of the content of this particular article. So we can understand that this article is going to discuss about a certain aspect of a topic. Below that section on keywords is a brief paragraph containing the abstract. Now, the reading of the article itself would be a time-taking exercise. To read it slowly and intensively and to understand all the viewpoints and arguments, counter-arguments discussed in it will obviously take a bit of time. But in order to save time and to understand what is going to be discussed in the article, or to understand the author's point of view, much more specifically, we have the abstract, which is a precise and short summary of the specific points which are taken up for discussion in that particular article. So it is professionally done. it is precise, it is detailed, even though it is brief. So if I want to have a good idea of the contents of the article, I would do no better than to read the abstract carefully, look at the title and other information contained over here on the front page of the paper before I actually plunge into the details of the discussion in that particular paper. There are also section headings. You will notice that I have highlighted some of the section headings. The whole article might be several pages long, or it might be quite lengthy. Okay? There are some research articles which are of a fairly optimum length. Now, they might be fairly lengthy, but if you have the whole article as a single block of text or just divided into paragraphs, then it's difficult to pinpoint or to understand what are the constituent units of that particular article, or to get a roadmap into its contents. So to guide us, what is often done is that there are different section headings which are given, inserted into the article, numbered section headings. So if there are 4 or 5 section headings in an article, for instance, by quickly reviewing these section headings before I actually read the article, I can get a fair idea about the different constituent parts of this article and so get an inkling of how the discussion has been formulated. So we have the section headings. Also, in the footnotes and if we have the end notes at the end of the article, we have the sources and references or the other details from where the author has extracted information or gathered information from. So they are also very helpful and they provide us some ideas regarding where the information is taken from. So you can understand that an academic text is a highly precise and professional document, and it has got several pointers to its underlying purpose, meaning, and discussions, which are already evident before we have gone through it. Now, going through it obviously demands time, attention, a fair level of understanding, and mental alertness. So naturally, we will have to devote some time and attention to a close reading of academic texts. But prior to that, they can be previewed through the help of the information which are already contained in the article, like the title, author information, the abstract, the keywords, section headings, footnotes, and references. These would provide a fair idea about the contents even before one has read the article. Now, there are also other kinds of texts, a newspaper or a brochure about some place which is being discussed, or let's say a guide brochure, or let us say a document which talks about certain machines, like a pamphlet, okay, which is an advertisement in effect about that machine. These are all expository or informational texts which provide information about certain subjects. So most often expository texts are non-fictional informational texts which are different from creative texts. So a creative text would be a poem or a novel or a short story, whereas expository texts would be like news articles, information books, textbooks, manuals, and so on. Now, expository texts usually follow a definite organizational structure. There is a topic sentence. There are also supporting sentences following that. There are well-ordered arguments which are sequenced, and structure like cause and effect, comparison and contrast, definition, example, problem, solution, or proposition, supporter, sequential listing. You will always find these structural units in the expository text. Also, the language is very, very clear and precise, moving from abstract to concrete, from general to specific. And they have usually a third person narration and a tone of authority because they are conveying authoritative information, or they are conveying information which is proven, and they are very, very authoritative. We have one. This is a sample expository text. I'm just reading out briefly from this. This is an introduction, rather, to the text. Just as there are many definitions of success, there are also many definitions of greatness. Alexander Smith said that a great person is someone who does a thing for the first time. He's right, and the list of those great people is long and includes the likes of Neil Armstrong, Jackie Robinson, and Thomas Edison. But Smith's definition isn't broad enough to include many other people who, I believe, are also great. In my opinion, greatness can also be attained by doing something to improve the lives of others. Okay, so the author over here, is talking about the concept of greatness. And according to the author, greatness does not just lie in achievements or doing a thing for the first time, but also doing something to improve the lives of others. And obviously, he's going to follow this up by talking about great inventions, or people who are involved in great inventions because they have improved the lives of others in a remarkable way, in a life-changing way. So this is a sample from an expository text. We also have narrative texts, and some of the texts in your syllabus which are prescribed for reading are narrative texts. Now, any type of writing relating a series of events, including fiction, that is stories, novels, poems, as well as non-fiction like memoirs, biographies, news stories, they are all narrative texts. So that is, there is a narrative or a process of narration in these texts. The purpose is to entertain and to hold the reader's interest for a sufficient length of time. The ideas and themes are universal and they relate to the reader's experiences. Uh, for example, if I'm talking about themes of love and loss in a short story, then I will link it up to broader themes of human isolation and human companionship, which are required. So I might be making that sort of a linkage. Also, there is a structure or there is a well-organized plot in the short stories. There is a narrative technique to be recognized. That is, there is narration in time by a third person or first person narrator or a second person narrator. There is characterization with well-developed characters. There is usually a specified setting which has a role to play in some way or the other. And also, some symbols and images may also be present in the short story. Now, engaging with the narrative text would involve a close reading and understanding of all these constituent elements. So we have to understand about the structure, we have to look at the plot, we have to look at the narrative technique, we have also to understand the characterization, setting, and if there are any symbols and images, we also have to explicate those. The whole thing would be required for a proper explication of the meaning of the entire text. For example, we have this short story, Mama's Boy. Now, the language of this story is evocative and non-technical. One day I came home from school with a bleeding nose, cut lips, and a black eye. It was seriously black. I bet you want to know how that happened. Well, I accidentally threw a ball at Freddy and it slammed into his head. It was pretty funny at the time until he came over, and then the joke was totally over. His revenge was a swirly. A swirly means you get your head flushed down the toilet. I didn't want my mum to find out, but my helpful friend James told her. You can never keep a secret if he knows about it. Now my entire school knows why my mum drives me to school every day. I am so embarrassed, and now everyone calls me Mama's boy. Okay, so the language is evocative, the language is personalized, it is in the first person narration, it is non-technical, this is definitely not an academic text. Also it's talking about past events and events leading up to the present. So this is very much a narrative text. So there are characters to begin with, the protagonist or the narrator himself, the boy and his mother, and also there are one or two friends which are talked about. So we have to read it carefully to understand how the narrative develops over course of time and how character and incident are revealed with the unfolding of the narrative over time. So this is what we do when we read a narrative text. It is a process of exploration and all the elements of the narrative text like plot, characterization, action, setting, they have all got to be taken into account. So when we read a narrative text, a very close and detailed reading is called for, obviously. We also read and mark out or highlight certain sections, descriptions of characters maybe, or maybe from the dialogue, we cull out certain statements or remarks or observations made by the characters which are important in terms of talking about their experiences or indicating changes in viewpoint or attitude and so on. We also annotate who has not made marginal notes or pencil notes in the margins of the various texts that we read or the books that we read in terms of stories. So we often make these notes. We also prepare a timeline of events. So usually a graphic organizer kind of a thing does help in helping us to understand. Sometimes the timeline is a bit confused in non-narrative, non-sequential texts. So we would tend to get very confused about what happens after what. So preparing the timeline of events is very helpful. We also understand the images and symbols that are used. For purposes of cross-referencing, comparison, and contrast, we can compare with other narrative texts. This story with that other story. This one with something else that we have read before. Also, understand the point of view of the writer or the narrator rather. Understand character or how character develops over time, and also understand the setting and what kind of role it plays in the development of the narrative. So these are all the strategies that we will use in order to explore narrative texts. Let us see in the context of the first narrative or the story that we have in our syllabus, Ruskin Bond's Night Train at Deoli, how this can be done. Now, I shall first introduce the short story or talk very briefly about the short story before I talk about Ruskin Bond, the writer, and then I go on to analyze the story and look at its setting, characters, and certain questions on the story. Now, as the name suggests, a short story is a story that is short or shorter than a novel. It can be of varying length, of course. It can be a very short story, or it can even be a very long one. So sometimes short stories are fairly lengthy. Now, it has few characters and limited incidents. A definite point of view and style, obviously, would be displayed. Often, the short story has symbolic elements. It's more like a prose poem. Sometimes we have also the play of the romantic and the supernatural in short stories. Actually, many writers have written short stories. We have certain writers who are specifically short story writers, but we also have many novelists. Virtually all novelists have written short stories at some point of time in their careers or not. Now, sometimes we have the short story, which includes a theme of we have the tradition of the narrator who comes under the spell of a fair unknown woman who vanishes utterly, leaving him bewildered and confused. So that sort of a La Belle Dame sans Merci kind of an episode or encounter is often there in the short stories. And the supernatural also figures very often in the short story. Now let us see how this particular story is developed by Ruskin Bond. Before we look at the story, a few words about Ruskin Bond, the writer. Ruskin Bond, of course, is one of our greatest living Indian writers. He is a novelist, short story writer, essayist, and whatnot. Now, many of his short stories are about the experiences of a young narrator and his travels and encounters in the world. The setting for his novels and stories is most often in the plains and hills of North India, the Doon Valley, where he lives himself, and its environs. The stories are often autobiographical and reveal important facets of human nature. They are rich in humor and have a style of their own. They are quiet and reflective, plain yet giving an impression of vividness. Now let us look at this particular story, The Night Train at Deoli. Before I discuss the story, I shall give a brief idea regarding its contents. This story is one of Bond's unforgettable stories. It deals with the young narrator's infatuation with a girl from the hills, her disappearance, and the lasting remembrance that the narrator has of her. Now, the narrator is a young man studying in college in New Delhi. Every summer during the vacations, he goes by train to visit his grandmother at Dera. On the way, the train passes through Deoli, a small but insignificant station where it stops briefly before going on again. One day, the narrator meets a young girl. She's a village girl who is selling baskets at the station at Deoli, and he finds himself attracted to her. They interact briefly before the train moves on. He finds her again on the return journey, and they have a more positive interaction this time. He is eagerly on the lookout for the girl when he comes again this way by train, but unfortunately she is not there. The narrator searches everywhere for her, even questions the people at Deoli when he gets down briefly at the station while the train halts, but to no avail. She is not to be found. The girl has irrevocably vanished, but her image remains in the mind of the narrator, and she continues to haunt him. This is not a story of happiness or fulfilled love, rather, it's a story of loss and unfulfilled love. However, the narrator does not seem to be heartbroken by his loss, and the girl could, in any case, not have become a part of his life because she belongs to a totally different world from his, and she remains an object of inspiration to him in the years that follow. So, this is a brief idea regarding the contents of the story. Now, we shall analyze the story. Now, first of all, if we look at the setting or the backdrop for the story, the setting for this story is the small and nondescript little station of Deoli. It's a remote and out-of-the-way place located on the edge of the forests, and it is glimpsed in the mysterious half-light and half-darkness in the early morning. So when the train reaches Deoli, it's around 5 a.m. in the morning. So the environs are still shrouded in the darkness of the retreating night, and the dawn is slowly breaking, so there is gathering light in the skies. So it's in this half light, half darkness, or chiaroscuro kind of atmosphere that this station is seen. So the whole atmosphere is kind of mysterious and tantalizing. It's a lone station and platform. Not a single person is in sight. The location is remote both in place and time. It's a mindscape of the fantasy and the imagination. I seen only for fleeting snatches. The train stops very briefly over there, and then it passes on. Okay, it then vanishes into the vast unknown. It gets swallowed up. So it's there, and then it's gone. So now you see it, now you don't. It's very briefly seen. It's tantalizing. It's mysterious, and it soon passes away. So this is a place where there is, one might say, an intersection of the timelessness with time, or it's an imaginary zone where anything might happen. In other words, Ruskin Bond has very carefully sketched in the mysterious background of Deoli, as the fitting location for the story or the encounter between the narrator and the girl to take place. Then, if we talk about the girl herself, now she is an ordinary village girl from the hills. She's simple and yet she is extraordinary in her beauty. What is notable about her, the narrator says, is her lustrous, or rather smoldering, quote unquote, eyes. So it is the magnetic glance from her beautiful, lustrous eyes which really captivates the heart of the young narrator. Now, as he is a fairly young and impressionable young man, we are told that he is a college student. So this is very natural, isn't it? That she should captivate him like this. But really, though she is not maybe that remarkable a beauty, but she does have some inner beauty. Initially, she appears to be fairly shy. She's a very simple and unsophisticated girl. She is a little shy, but she picks up the courage to speak to a total stranger. And remember, the narrator is a stranger to her, and he's a city dweller, so naturally she would be shy of a person like that. But she does pick up the courage to speak to him, and of course, she does have to speak to him if she is going to sell any of her baskets. So she asks him whether he wants to buy a basket or not. She's very frank, she's very artless and sincere. Okay. So her object is only to sell baskets, not to captivate the narrator or do anything else. Now, she does respond, however, to the narrator's fascination, but she also knows that she belongs to this world of Deoli, and she does not belong to the narrator's world. In fact, she says there is a very revealing interchange that takes place between the narrator and the girl, the time that he holds her hand. Uh, he says, I felt the impulse to put her on the train there and then and take her away with me. I could not bear the thought of having to watch her recede into the distance of Deoli station. I took the baskets from her hand and put them down on the ground. She put out her hand for one of them, but I caught her hand and held it. I have to go to Delhi, I said. She nodded. I do not have to go anywhere. The guard blew his whistle for the train to leave, and how I hated the guard for doing that. So she knows that she does not belong to his world. I do not have to go anywhere, she says. She is going to remain here, and this will be her location. Of course, she vanishes without a trace, and the narrator is not going to find her when he comes back, and he completely fails to trace her whereabouts. Though she continues to inspire him, we can say that she is more of a spirit in this lonely world of imagination, or rather, that she is the narrator's muse. That is how she plays a very important and significant role in his life, in shaping his imagination. So, more than being just a literal girl who fascinates him, she is rather his muse who inspires him for years afterwards. Now, the narrator is a young and impressionable man. He's a college student in Delhi. He's traveling on vacation to meet his grandmother, and he's smitten by the look in her eyes, which exert a kind of romantic fascination on him. Their budding romance is cut short by the inexorable reality. The train only stops briefly, and they belong to different worlds. The narrator belongs to the everyday world, and the girl belongs to the romantic world of imagination. The narrator's quest to find her is really foredoomed because she has no place in his actual physical world. His wish, therefore, to explore Deoli and its environs remains just that, a wish. And he wants to join in the numinous world of imagination, but he cannot because of the continual pressures of the workday world, which keep pulling him towards it. At the end, I would like to look at certain romantic elements in the story. The story has certain marked romantic elements, like the lonely setting of Deoli, the obscure station on the verge of the forest seen in the mysterious half-light. It is a very appropriate setting for a girl who vanishes, a story having romantic elements. The young narrator hero, eager for new impressions, has a very ardent romantic sensibility, and the girl or the seller of baskets in the story is a girl of humble origins and a working class character who is close to nature, like Wordsworth's The Solitary Reaper, The Leech Gatherer, and other such romantic figures. So these are a few romantic elements in the story. We can have questions in the story like, is The Night Train at Deoli a story of infatuation, in which we have to discuss the narrator's infatuation for the girl? We can also have a question on the role of the girl selling baskets in the story, and why the narrator plans to explore Deoli and whether he ever manages to do so. Also, a question describing the station of Deoli and its environs. A brief note on the imagery used in the story, in which light and darkness would obviously play a very important role. Discussing the story as a story of suspense and mystery, and also the story as a romantic story. So these are some of the important questions that can be there on the story. So I hope I have clarified for you the nature of this particular text, which is there in your BTech syllabus, The Night Train at Deoli by Ruskin Bond. So in this lecture, we have looked at the nature of different kinds of texts, technical, non-technical, or rather expository texts, and narrative and non-narrative texts, and also this particular story. So this brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.